Okay, good evening. It is Tuesday, April 25th, 2023, 6:05 p.m. This is the meeting of the Conservation Commission / Inland Wetland Agency for the lovely city of Norwalk. Could we have the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Cheryl Brown,
Here.
Catherine Knight,
Here.
Steve Clockey,
Here.
and Amy Richardson.
Here.
Perfect. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I will skip our mission statement tonight. Public comment. Do we have someone that has called in already, or is that?
That is a participant, and you have no other attendees. So anyone that you see on the screen is an applicant.
Sounds great. Okay, moving on to receipt and discussion. We have no new. Is that possible?
Yeah, I was
receiving
just
any
saying
new-
today. Yeah, no, there are things. I have been busy talking to pre-application people, but this is the longest run of no new applications in my career.
Wow.
So I don't know if that just means that we've, I do think that Norwalk has entered an age as far as like development, not counting corrective action, which keeps us busy, but I do think that Norwalk is seeing an age of a lot of redevelopment. And that has the economics for redevelopment work out better than the economics for kind of this marginal land with wetlands or whatever. But there is more coming.
Okay.
They just haven't applied tonight.
We'll enjoy the break while we have it then. Moving on to discussion and or decision, S23-613, 18 Eastwood Road.
Okay, so this is a corrective action application. It was initially received as an application some time ago, so the statutory timelines are creeping up on it. The applicant has provided a 65-day extension of time for you to render a decision. With that additional 65 days, it gets you to the May 23rd meeting. So we have a few more weeks to work on the application. I think Mr. Suarez is on the call, right? You're calling in?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. And so I'll just give a recap. I met with Mr. Suarez yesterday. And he is still actively working on trying to find a professional to assist him in working on a plan to meet the standards for application submission to this commission. Just to backtrack, at the previous meetings, Mr. Suarez had retained a environmental consulting group that did do a narrative report and description. Within that report, they suggested some mitigation plantings and other mitigation activities. They also suggested that a additional assistance be sought for drafting an invasive plant management plan. And it was the agency's comments previously that the site plan that shows the planting and the other work so far was not in line with all the elements in that report. So he's looking for someone to tie it all together, to give him an invasive management plan and do a site plan or a series of site plans that you can refer to him and hopefully approve. And so, Mr. Suarez, if you have anything to add, feel free, and then the commission may have some questions for you, or maybe not.
No, Mrs. Alexis, you have said everything. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just keep waiting until we've got more refined information, but we do have the clock ticking. But you did say, Alexis, that this can theoretically go until our 5/23 meeting and still be within the timeline requirements.
Right, so your,
Okay.
the May 23rd meeting is the last regular meeting before the expiration of time happens.
And I'm sorry, that was after already an extension was granted, or okay, so we've already played that card.
That's the deadline. It
Got
cannot be moved.
Okay, so it is.
We'll see you again on
great.
May 9th.
May 9th.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Keep me posted.
Great, thank you. Have a great day.
You
You
too.
too.
Okay, moving on to S23-616, 761 Main Avenue. Do we have any new information on this?
No.
And
So I did reach out to the, if you recall the last time that the applicant, who's represented by Mr. Larry Stewart, was on, he had indicated that they had engaged with a professional engineer, but then that engineer, for whatever reason, was no longer taking them as a client or for that work. I'm not quite sure. And so he did hire a new engineer, and that engineer had called me a while ago, I think right after that last meeting, and I called him back and left a message, but then I never heard back from him. So last week I finally called him again to see what was going on, and he was working on the plans, but did not feel that they certainly weren't ready for tonight. So I advised him of the regulatory timelines for this one as well, which are the same as the previous one. They have already granted a 65-day extension of time, and the May 23rd meeting is the last meeting for a decision.
Okay. Good enough. So
Um,
we'll keep our eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's an incomplete application, and it's for any incomplete application, if you have to make a decision on it, it's best to not make an affirmative decision on it, and have them try again.
Right on. Okay. Then moving on to S19-546B, 10 Willard Road.
Mr. Jason Enters emailed me earlier in the week or at the end of last week, wanting to meet me out there to discuss the location of proposed plantings. And so I am meeting him out there tomorrow. He indicated in an email earlier today that he thought it would be prudent for him to skip tonight, and then he'll come back to the next meeting on May 9th to discuss further. I did remind him of some of the materials that the agency had requested at previous meetings, in particular a professional engineer's report confirming there won't be any issues with scour or other issues with the changed elevation of the culverts. And something else that my brain
There
is
was the
just not
mulched
remembering.
area.
There's
The,
also conservation easement.
There, right, so there is the conservation easement. Oh, yes, so I do have confirmation. Hold on, I just find my email to him. Oh, and then I had also reminded him that there was a particular question regarding the altered location of the fence closer to the watercourse around the tower, and the request for some kind of backup. And then, yeah, he had kind of indicated that it was the city's now. It is still owned by him. There is an easement to the city that is a that removes development rights and provides public access. But he does own the property and is still the entity that would do the any required maintenance. So I'll clarify that with him tomorrow when I see him at the site.
I just have a question on the conservation easement. Is it
Yes.
on both sides of the culvert or just on the one side? There's kind of the culvert that goes around and then there's conservation easement and then there's where they put down wood chips. Is that
Right.
also conservation easement? It would be, I don't know if it's
It
possible to
is.
post up the conservation easement or to see it, just so we know what is in
Yeah,
there.
I will pull up the map. The easement area is is only on the side of the water course, away from the buildings. I'll share my screen real quick.
I guess my question is, does it go around the corner?
And then, yes, so it'll be easier to. Oops. There we go. So the easement area is the hatched area on the plan. And so you're talking about this corner of where it
Okay,
goes
so it's the whole area there is
Yes,
conservation
so-
easement.
this area is all conservation easement area, and then this area that's along Strawberry Hill Avenue is conservation easement area.
It would be
And
helpful
it's-
to know in looking at those areas, what
Mhm.
specifically is in the conservation easement in terms of if there's over and above like the inland wetland restrictions on use, cutting trees, or, you know, the state of the area.
Okay, I
Um,
can,
because typically you don't see fences in conservation easement areas unless it's like for agric.
Well, we
Right,
approved
and-
that, didn't we?
you did. So
Yep.
there was a bit of discussion about that, and actually I'll have to check the easement language because they have it on there as built as including the passive recreation area with or the dog park. And I thought that they had ended up excluding that from the conservation easement area, but I will confirm that for the next meeting. But yes,
Yeah, normally you
there
don't
are-
put dog parks in conservation easements because that's not very conserving.
Yep, there was, I know, a lot of discussion with the both conservation and then from the Planning and Zoning Commission when this was approved about what could be in the conservation easement, because there's a fair number of man-made components, including this is the grass paver fire lane, a walkway, and then portions of the bridges are within the easement area. And there had been a discussion regarding the dog park area as well. But I'll just send the entire easement to you guys
Okay.
that was filed on the land records.
I was also looking at the slope stabilization planting plan that they have put together. A lot of the plants, they like the shrubs, they have them spec'd at 1 gallon containers,
Yep.
and that's the size that you would plant a perennial. I think
Yep.
they need to I would like to see them rethink the size of the shrubs. Like, I have no problem. They have a switchgrass in there. 1 gallon is totally fine for that. But the other things, I think they're going to get lost. I think with some of the invasive plants growing in there, if you're trying to grow shrubs and they're that small, the invasives are going to end up really, they're going to take over in that area. I don't know if
Yeah.
like 1 gallon containers are going to help.
I agree. So I know that often you, for your draft resolutions, require shrubs to be a minimum of 30 or 36 inches at the time of planting. Would that work for you? Or,
Yeah, I think, that would be good to see.
okay.
Can you also, just for reference, sorry, just to show, where is the proposed or where they've put in bamboo vis-a-vis like the conservation
Yeah.
area and the
So it is outside of the conservation area. This
Yep.
is the pre-existing tower. It's
Okay,
been there for forever. This is the new building, and the bamboo is planted along this area here. So just south of the chain link fence that surrounds the tower.
and is that in the upland review area?
That is in the upland review area, yes. So the chain link fence used to follow the stippled area, which is the special lease area, I guess. And so this is the area of the fence that's been bumped out, which is in the upland review area, and then the bamboo is, yes, in the upland review area. Yep. And so the applicant did provide his bill of sale for the bamboo. And I think that someone had suggested at the last meeting that in addition to that, that they provide additional information regarding the containment mechanism that they referenced. Does that still make sense, or would you like more different information from him?
I'm not hearing Steve. Is anybody else?
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was my comment on the bamboo, and I feel like just having it in general, regardless of whatever sort of container we put around it, is a bad idea. But I would be happy to be convinced otherwise by someone who is, impartial, objective, etc. I mean, I think the cost and the effort they went through to get it is completely irrelevant to me. It's there, so what's it gonna do, That's all that really matters.
Right.
Not like they didn't know there was a giant tower when they built the building.
And they're aware of the wetland area. I'm not, yeah, I agree. I'm not sure that I see where there's the benefit vis-a-vis kind of the planting plan that we're still waiting to see. The planting plan is bamboo.
Where did they put the bamboo exactly on? Can you like show
Yeah,
me on the plan?
Right.
And
can see your
so,
mouse.
Did you see the mouse? Right
yeah,
in the center. Right
It-
there.
I also don't understand why they wouldn't have chosen just a different plant, like that was native and spoken to us.
They probably just didn't consider
Uh,
it. I mean, bamboo works really good for that application. I mean, if you want to screen something out and have it be dense, I mean,
Yeah.
pretty
It
good
is
option.
effective,
Very effective.
and it is, right, it is, has that vegetative density year round, pretty much.
I don't understand why it's just that side of the tower. Why? I mean, was that the only tenant that complained or something? Or I don't get it.
So I don't think that there aren't windows here, but there are
Oh,
windows here. There are
okay.
balconies here, but not on these other sides. So the balconies come back over here. That's what these the little bump
Okay.
outs are the units. So it's,
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
all right. Well, I will bring all of your comments to him tomorrow and encourage him to follow up on all of the requested information and attend to the next meeting.
Gravy. Thank you. Moving on then to S23-617, 16 Fireside Court.
Doesn't
I don't
look like
remember what
the
this one
applicant is here. This one is another corrective action application. Let me just pull that up real quickly. And share my screen again. Um, So this application was received at the last meeting, but there wasn't any information other than the application form itself. And the applicant did hire a professional to come up with a planting plan and a restoration plan. Fireside Court is off of brain tonight is in West Norwalk off of, I'll look it up. He's surrounded by wetlands. So he's got a wetland and water course on the east side of him, just off site. There's a water course that ends in a culvert down here. And then there is a pond immediately off the property here. And so I received a complaint, and upon inspection found that he had done a variety of landscaping and construction activities that were regulated activities. And so he's really focused on this area where he had said that he was removing the dumped material that was dumped by the previous owner. He's a relatively new owner of this lot. And we found that he had done some clearing and kind of aggressive cleaning of the woodland floor. So it was non-vegetated. So he's proposing mostly, so 17 shrubs and then a fair number of variety of fern for the area that was impacted. I'll show you photos in a minute. This is a low point. It comes up to a hill and then it drops down to another low point. So this is on that slope. Then we also cited him for installing this gravel drive in addition to the large shed that he did some additional work on to increase its height. There's a carport, temporary carport here, and then some digging. This whole area was dug up when we were there. And it's the pond is right here. Let me just show you some real photos. So this is what the property looked like in 2019. So driveway, this is the water course on the eastern edge of the neighboring property. This is the pond right on the property line on the western side. This is that hill slope. The neighbor at 14 Fireside had a long time ago done some landscaping, including putting this row of arborvitae, and maintains this kind of circular feature with a gazebo that's been there for a very long time. And then this is another oblique shot from last month, which was kind of freaky. So this is where he came in, and you can see the area without grass. This whole area here was cleared down to just bare earth. And then the back is the now dormered shed garage thing, the gravel and the temporary structure. And I'll do site photos just really quickly. I think I've showed these to you before, but just to refresh your memory. So this is the evergreens that are actually on 14 Fireside, the neighboring property. This is the neighboring property in the old gazebo. And so it was this area and up this slope that had just been stripped of all ground vegetation. So another photo of the same area. And then on the opposite side of the property, again, there was a bit of deposition of dirt, deposition of a gravel driveway. So again, this is the dirt, and the gravel driveway is where this truck is, and then expansion of the shed. And so those were all the things that were cited. And that is the proposed plan. So basically to retain this area. One thing that I would want the applicant to clarify is that this whole area is not lawn. The lawn is actually comes in something like this. So this is all wooded,
Yeah, it's all trees, picture.
yes.
Hmm.
So I would like that clarified because it is directly adjacent to that pond. So basically, he's asking to keep the gravel and I think the disturbed area next to the gravel has been seeded by now, and do this mix of shrubs. One of the things that I have told the applicant is necessary is a letter of signed consent from the owner of 14 Fireside Court. A lot of the activity is on 14, and I have not received that yet. 14 Fireside is aware of the violation. When I did the violation and when I did the site inspection, and then when we came back to the office, I realized that we were actually straddling the property line. And so a notice of violation was sent to 14 as well. And I have spoken to them, but I have not received anything from them regarding the application by the current applicant or their permission to actually implement what's shown on the application. So
I have a question about, because on the plan there's the existing shed, but then
yes,
there's a carport. Does that have a roof on it? That structure's not in there. And is that,
right, they don't,
is that in the upland review area of the pond, or is that,
it is.
okay?
So
So
I
are
can
they
certainly
planning
ask
on
them.
parking cars in it, or, I mean, what's the,
He has not said, but I would presume so.
but I also, I mean, like from planning and zoning, I mean, this is their purview, but my understanding is that there's setbacks.
There are, so there's, and I believe, don't know if he's gotten a notice of violation from zoning, not yet or not. I know that the zoning inspector knows about it.
I mean, is
So
there anything that says that structures should be added into review areas and water flows and cars with
There's-
oil leaks?
for zoning, no, but you can certainly require more information regarding this structure, and if it is a structure with a foundation or if it really is just a temporary tent. That's definitely a reasonable question for a wetland agent such as yourself.
Okay, so there's still a lot of moving parts here. There's the neighbors' permission. There's the fact that a bunch of trees south of the tennis court aren't shown on the drawing. The carport tent, whatever it is next to the shed, is not shown. I think it'd be valuable to see a dash line showing the 100-foot upland review area for the water course. I think we need 50-foot upland review areas for wetlands. I think the drawing right now is conveniently lacking in a couple of ways. To summarize, I'm just summarizing other observations that you guys have made.
I mean, I would just, yeah. Want to know a little bit more about the structure and kind of the change of footprint and change of, what the
Use.
water retention is for, whether whether it's expanded the footprint or the stormwater issues.
Yeah, I don't think I'm concerned about the dormers added to the shed. Does anybody feel differently?
I'm concerned to the extent that it could look like setting up a second dwelling on the property.
Okay.
In
Yeah,
a
so zo-
upland review area. If you're putting a carport next to it, you've dormered it,
Sure.
but some of that crosses over into zoning, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and zoning will look at that as an accessory structure, as a non-conforming pre-existing accessory structure for the shed, not the carport. I think the dormers might render it to be too tall for zoning regulations.
Interesting. Okay. Anybody else have thoughts?
I don't know also like for the gravel, whether the gravel's staying in there or,
Yeah, he's not here, right?
It says, the drawing says to remain, I think.
Yeah, yep. So that was my understanding.
I guess the slope of that would be something interesting to know.
Yeah, it's
You-
relatively flat.
Flat,
Yeah, it doesn't really come out in the photos, but it's there.
got it.
And then it drops down behind down to the water. You can kind of see that dark thing is the water.
How far is the water from like even the property line? Do we know?
It is,
Looks pretty close.
yeah, so it's close. It doesn't have it. Let's see, we can do this.
yeah, that's how, well, where are we?
16 fire side. Okay, so it's off of Richards Avenue, Fireside Court, number 16. Here's the pond. And then it is, I don't have topography on this, but it is a slope down. It looks like it is almost 27 feet from the back of the shed to the water's edge.
Thank
I
you.
did look at the shed. One of the first things I did was I went to go back to see when the shed was permitted. I could not find a permit for the shed, but I did find other permits that conservation signed off on over the years that included the shed. And the shed is, well, at least a version of a shed. I don't know if it's this exact shed, has been in that same location since before we have consistent aerial photos. So it's before, the shed predates my time here. So there's no kind of grandfathering with the Wetland Act, but if something happened before I started working here, which was 2001, I don't know what my predecessors did or didn't think. So especially for things like sheds, I presume that it was okay. So yeah, 26 feet.
I guess maybe it would be helpful to know exactly what work was done, because if it was a shed, which was really for storing tools, is fundamentally different than a dwelling that has more permanent features or is finished space. So, you know, it's a different beast when you're going from an unfinished shed to a finished space, I guess.
I
So
will
it would be
ask
helpful to
you
understand what's gone on there.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone? Okay. Good stuff. That's it for discussion and or decision. Moving on to bond release / reduction requests. The first one is S19-543. 45 Devils Garden Road.
Yes. Yes. So this one was a corrective action from 2019. They this was they have a pond on their property and adjacent wetland, and they had cleared and then filled in a portion of the pond to make more lawn. So that was successfully removed, renovated, and replanted. And I think that they are now finally ready for bond release. I did an inspection last week. The plants that they eventually did install have actually all survived, and they look very good. So staff would recommend release.
Anybody have questions? If not, I'll move to release the bond in full. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you much. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
I,
It's unanimous, since Amy doesn't have a vote yet.
And so actually, so none of you were, well, for bond releases, it's kind
What
of
does
like a
matter?
new, yeah, because it's a new discussion on potentially something that you weren't here for. Like the next one is a 2017 permit, and I don't know. Maybe Cheryl's, have you been on since 2017? See, I lose track.
No, I think 2019, I might have been on
2019.
for the 45 Devil's Garden. That was a
Yeah.
pond, right?
Yes, yeah,
Took a while. And I think
Yes.
Steve was on there too at that point, because I think
Yeah,
he was
so it
on
was-
before I was, so.
yeah, you went back and forth. But anyway, so bonds you can vote on, Amy, because all of these are kind of like newish, and it's just a determining whether you agree with my babbling or not.
Okay. All right, so can we do the vote again? All in
No,
favor?
you don't
Aye.
have to.
I,
There we go. Okay, none opposed. Release that bond. S17-513-25 Huckleberry Drive South.
I think that this one can also be released. This will mark the closing of a chapter of probably the longest running corrective action I've ever had. It also involved the filling of a wetland with an extraordinary amount of dirt. That dirt was pulled back. A boundary of boulders was installed. Plants were installed in the wetland. And those plants are still there and the boulders are still there. So I would recommend release at this time.
Any takers? Okay, I'll move then.
I'll second it.
Oh.
But I beat,
She's 2 for
Sorry.
2.
you're quick, quick draw.
Any discussion?
Whatever.
All in favor? Aye.
I,
All right, it's unanimous. Moving on to S20-563, 57 Noah's Lane Extension. Oh, that was a new house, right?
No, that
No.
was, it looks like a new house, but it's actually an old house and they did a kind of a gutting and second story addition. So it had been a little single story ranch like thing and it looks very different. And then what brought it to you was a couple things. There was a septic system and then they did a extensive redo of the rear yard. This is one that had a low retaining wall in the rear yard, and then it would drop down to a wetland and then a small little stream. And the applicant wished to move the retaining wall further back to increase their lawn area. But in return, they kind of fixed the wetland area, which had been dumped and was kind of a mess of non-native invasives. They had a play area and a shed proposed on that retaining wall limit. Let's see. Oh, I know what I can do. I can show you aerial photos.
You actually just had it up on your GIS, I think.
Yes. Nice. So let me, oops. Hold on. Back and share screen. Okay. So this is the water course here. This is before it's really greened up, but this is the new wall, the shed, then the playscape. This is the restored wetland. And you can't see them, but there are a bunch of shrubs and forbs planted back there. I was out there last week and took photos. So that's, and then previously. No, you can't really tell, but that's a one-story house. And then the wall was closer to the house, and they bumped out the house. But you can kind of tell that it was not heavily vegetated previously. And there's kind of a bit of debris and junk thrown back there. So that's all been cleaned up, and it's definitely cleaner and healthier. Although this particular picture doesn't make it look that great. But so
Okay,
staff would recommend release. It has been 2 full growing seasons.
okay, so moved.
Second,
Second,
Catherine got it that time. Any
I
discussion?
was waiting and then I was like, oh, maybe she's not going to.
All in favor? Aye.
I
Unanimous. Okay. Did anybody read the meeting minutes from March 28th?
looked them over. I didn't see any, they looked fine.
Okay. You want to approve?
So I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes
second.
from March 28th.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great.
Right.
Okay, so now for some more interesting stuff, the conservation initiatives. You had sent a link to us, Alexis, to the zoning regulations update.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. So, and Catherine, sorry, it's been a long day. Had attended one of the meetings and had some good questions. And so that just kind of started thinking about how to comment, but then also a very good opportunity for the Conservation Commission, your role not as the inland wetland agency, but as the Conservation Commission and the kind of protectors of citywide natural resources. It might be a very good citywide project for the commission to make comment on. And so I didn't know if you wanted to discuss the regulations more. I don't have Brian Baker and Steve Kleppen, who are both in the planning and zoning office as well. They are going on, they're doing their roadshow. They're going out to and doing multiple community meetings, generally by council district, to go through and explain the regulatory changes and then go into kind of a deeper dive of what it means for each council district, what's changed within that district, and then have additional Q&A. But I know that there are parts of the regulations that our zoning regulations didn't have previously, particularly with grading, clearing, tree removal, that is now in there, which is much better. It also refers to the current city stormwater drainage standards, which were adopted in 2017. The old regulations did not refer back to that. So the commission had a little bit of a gap when requiring stormwater improvements. And then it also changes some of the language in the Coastal Area Management Act, which is part of Norwalk zoning regulations, in CAM, as it's referred to in short form. There are a variety of exemptions. There's quite a few exempted activities, and those exemptions have been constricted and tightened down so that any activity within 50 feet of a coastal resource, and then it lists specific ones. Basically, if you're next to open water, you won't be exempt anymore. And then lastly, there's some changes to the flood hazard area regulations, which really have to do with the protections of people and places. There's a lot of overlap between the areas that we regulate. So you as the Inland Wetland Agency regulate water courses, and floodplains are a type of riverine wetland. And you're looking to make sure that the activities people are doing aren't going to negatively impact that natural resource. And that can include its ability to hold floodwaters. But FEMA, through the planning and zoning regulations, is looking at the same water courses in the floodplain adjacent to them, but how changes within those might increase the base flood elevation and cause more flood hazard to upstream or downstream people. And so the regulations are proposing some changes to those regulations as well. So that's just kind of my, they also have kind of some sustainability language for certain development things with materials, window glazing, and something else that I'm blanking on.
I saw that shading of glazing. Southern facing windows shall be shaded during summer months with trees, awnings, roof overhangs, or porches is in zones where applicable. So like, just for example, what would one of those be?
Knew you were going to ask me that. Have to, so on the regulations, let's see. I'll just share my screen. Show you where the regulations are. So, the planning and zoning page, and click on the thing that says Norwalk,
Yeah,
and there's a lot of information. There's some kind of one sheet kind of information pages, a feedback form, and then wait a minute, no, that's not, I'm in the wrong place. The glazing, that's in number 4. It's loading. My home internet is not the best, and each article is the article 4 in particular is very large, so it's taking a few minutes. There is a so in article 4 there are all the different zones, and so each zone has probably 4 to 5 pages committed to it. And then after that, there is, so it should be within the in those tables. Let's see.
I like the formatting. It's really easy to read.
Thanks. So this is, for example, the new CD3L community district 3, which is kind of a suburban, but with larger lots. Let's see if we can find it. And so for each district, or the old zone, it would have a graphic with the setbacks. Setbacks, frontages, types of spaces. Well, I know that 3DL does not include the glazing requirements, so let's see. It's funny that you asked that, because that was on my list of things to answer by the end of the day, because like Steve's ask.
Sorry.
No, it's a very good question. Landscaping plans and additional standards.
Man, God, I love the formatting.
Screen. Here we go. So no, that's screens, buffers, materials. So the NR is not required. P is permitted or allowed. NP is not permitted. NA would not be applicable. Sometimes you'll see an R, which is required, and then the rest is not regulated. And I think I need to go to another district. We're still going. This is the overlay districts. Let me go to another one where I know there is glazing, and then we can work backwards.
It's you're in the wrong section. It's Article 6.
Oh, it is in Article 6?
Yeah,
but then
you
it
went
says
first
it
and-
oh. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just
But I thought that it
shading
then
of glazing
said,
is in Article 6.
but then it says depending on the zone, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay, I see. So it's
Yeah,
just
so
a
I was trying to
definition
figure
there.
out which zone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see.
Yeah, because it doesn't say where these apply here. It
Right.
just says that
It's
they
just the
apply
standard.
sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
I will look that up though. I won't waste your time. So I didn't know if you wanted to work on a, I strongly encourage, if you have any interest in reading the zoning regulations, go for it. There is on the website, there is a handy dandy little form you can click on anywhere almost, and it brings you to a little form that just asks who you are, what article or chapter you're referring to, or if it's just the entire thing, and then you can just type your comment. So if you want to individually comment, all comments are welcome. And we're working on a way to tabulate all of them. Any comment that you put to this on this form is anonymous. It does not record what your name is or what your email is, just so you know, and spread the word. But what it does help is by putting comments into this form, it separates it out by article and makes it a little bit easier for staff to organize all of them. We are working on a way to organize all of them and make that public facing so that other people can see what comments have been made.
So how long is the comment period open for?
A long time.
Okay.
It is, let's go back to the schedule. They're doing the public presentations, those community meetings I was talking about are running through the end of May. So this is the schedule for them. So this is all just initial kind of, here it is, what are your questions, what are your comments, and then the Conservation Commission will continue to be given all of those comments, and then they're going to have to weed through which comments they want to add to the draft. And then it won't be until maybe June that the formal public hearing. So whenever there's regulations adopted, you have to, there's a formal process with public hearings and notice to other various entities. These are all kind of the pre-information stage. But the goal right now is a public hearing potentially in June, and that would be the formal public hearing. So until June, but prior to those public hearings is probably the best time to make comment. But then in addition to this stage of general public comment, there's going to be additional public hearings on the regulations, but I would encourage sooner than later. Because the goal is to have the Planning and Zoning Commission potentially change the language that's in the draft before they go to the full public hearing.
Are there any towns around that are good kind of examples of zoning where conservation ideals are incorporated that we could look at as examples? by
Um,
chance?
mhm. Um. hmm. So there are a lot of components to the zoning regulations. I'd say that, as far as plantings in particular, and, like treescape with, or.
Just how they've
Mhm.
incorporated any kind of things into the zoning, like good examples, like I don't know, like native plantings or rain gardens or like I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I was just
Um,
wondering.
yeah, so I was just trying to hone in on which part. The city of Hartford has an extremely robust section on trees. I think our law department, it has a lot, I think probably more than what the um administration or the planning and zoning commission is comfortable with, as far as regulating the extent of activity on private land. I don't know if Norwalk has the staff to do that much of a deep dive, but that is an excellent example of a really robust regulatory scheme for landscaping. I know that we took for the in the Article 6, which kind of does kind of all the citywide standards. We added more information regarding tree clearing and grading, and that largely came from the town of New Canaan regulations. Steve Kleppen worked for New Canaan previously, so we have heavily used those. I'm trying to think of specific. I'll have to think about it. I don't have all my notes. I know that I looked at a lot of towns, their CAM regulations and their flood regulations. The coastal area management is all kind of different. Westport is a relatively good example of coastal area management articulation.
Okay. Just, I was just wondering if, because if we're going to be looking at this, if there was anywhere else that we could look to see what
Yeah,
other places are doing. So,
yeah. It's a real mixed bag. I mean, there's
Yeah.
169 different municipalities, and I mean, they all have the same enabling statute, but especially with zoning, which has been around since what, 1929 or something like that. There's 169 different approaches to administering zoning. They're all
Okay.
very different once you start to look around.
yeah.
Just to share with the group, one of the things that I flagged was because of being involved in the SteerCo for the climate resiliency project and the projections that the state of Connecticut had asked UConn to kind of lead the charge in looking at coastal towns on the working premise of a sea level rise of 2 feet. And a challenge that I saw in the zoning was the baseline elevation was stated as 1 foot above baseline 100-year floods. Now, obviously,
Mhm.
that's not going to hold toward what the projections are for sea level rise or climate change. So I'm not quite sure how long-standing that or useful that requirement would be for flood zone areas. Because it just seems to contradict kind of the metrics that parts of the city are working on and what is being put into zoning. which should be forward-looking. The other question was, and it's not Conservation Commission, but it was just around Connecticut's aspiration, signing up with the other states for the EV transformation of the car fleet, both
Mhm.
with municipal and state. And with that, currently, I guess they're planning on zoning of saying that they would require EV chargers in buildings or developments of 20,000 square foot and above. But if you look at opportunities for participation in residential and the multifamily dwellings and the kind of percentage of Norwalk population that are rentals, it makes it very challenging in rental agreements for people to then have EV fleets if it's not put into zoning, planning and zoning regs onto who's should be supplying it, and even just in commercial developments. And, you know, it would be beneficial if they could have higher voltage or faster chargers being put in around places in the town. The other thing is just on the coastal tidal wetlands. There's really not much protection at all that's being brought in. And when I look at some of the smaller lots, you know, it's very difficult to, you know, have the buffer zones that were envisioned in the act, the Coastal Management Act, and versus what you actually see on the ground in Norwalk. I know it doesn't fall under this particular conservation. There's not really anybody locally that's managing coastal tidal wetlands and development therein. And so they really have deteriorated a lot in the last 10 years. And it puts the whole city as being more vulnerable to climate change and flooding and everything else. Not to mention the ecological damage of the benefit of what tidal estuaries provide for plankton development and everything else. I mean, it's a key source of oxygen for the planet.
Yeah, and I think that all your comments are, you know, you're saying, and I don't know if that's for this group, but I would say that it is, as the Conservation Commission. You have the Conservation Commission, you know, it's not a regulatory group, it's just an advisory group. And your charges is all natural resources in the city. And that includes our very important neighbor, Long Island Sound. And I think it can also include anything related to climate change. So
What should we do?
So, I mean, I've taken a note of Catherine's, you know, what she's brought up. I can certainly for the next meeting go through and highlight all the parts, because it's a very long document. I don't think you have any time to read the entire thing, but I can highlight the parts that include the things that Catherine mentioned, or you know, don't, or where it would be but it isn't, and then other items that might tie back to natural resource management. I can send you kind of the individual chapters where it does talk about sustainability incentives, impervious coverage.
Is that
Are-
something that's a heavy lift or a light lift? So what I'm thinking is if you could zero it in for us and just kind of give us
Yep.
homework, and we can divide
Mhm.
amongst ourselves. Okay, I'll review this section, you review that section. That way, you know, we can share the load. And then have a sort of, and then bounces off each other, right? What we find in our respective homework assignments, and then maybe put together we can put together what's the sheet, a talking points sheet that we can distribute to friends, colleagues, whatever, and then they can comment on the plan individually via the website, and then we could also put together our own sort of Conservation Commission memorandum and submit that to P and Z office, right?
Mhm.
Is that, does
Yeah,
that sound
I
reasonable?
think I think that sounds good, because there may be some things that each of you individually discover while reviewing the regulations that you want to comment, but then collectively, you know, decide how to effectively wield your advisory respect um, and come up with a memo to the zoning, planning and zoning commission on behalf of the conservation
Okay.
commission.
I mean, I
Could-
guess a question that I have, just to clarify, as to when was it moved that, because currently the coastal area management, as I look at the new regs, the review, the determination as to whether and those areas will or won't be conserved, or whether exemptions will be granted, sits in planning and zoning. But when it comes to inland wetlands, that, the preservation or looking at the protection of natural assets in that category comes to the Conservation Commission. Was there a point in time where it just sat with planning and zoning before it got kicked over and a Conservation Commission was established, or?
No, so the Conservation Commission, we can look this up real quick, was the planning and zoning has been around for a long time, and then the Conservation Commission was established in 1972, and then soon after the Wetlands Act was passed in 72, and the Conservation Commission by the council was given the charge of acting as the inland wetland agency. So let's just go back to dates. So the Conservation Commission was changed it, so they don't have the so this was adopted in 73, 72. And then let's see, this is changed. Go back to the Wetland Act, which is what, 60A. The Conservation Commission has always been the, so I was off. So the Conservation Commission has always been the acted as the inland wetland agency. So the Conservation Commission was established in 73, and then it was authorized by the council to be the inland wetland agency in February of 74. And then the Coastal Area Management Act was adopted, what, in 82? Was that act? Can't remember. And at that has the authority to administer the CAM Act has always been part of the zoning regulations. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, how come it hasn't gone? I mean, it's not very protected. I'll just put it that way.
The coastal areas.
Yeah, the coastal areas
Yeah.
within Norwalk are
Yeah,
not very protected.
Right. So there's a
I mean, there's no protection of trees or vegetation or animals or anything in them.
So the Coastal Area Management Act is the enabling legislation. Like if you go back to the Connecticut General Statutes, its construct is different from the inland wetland regulations in a lot of ways. And so there are all these exemptions. It's kind of I don't know, it's different. I'm trying to and Amy, if you're comfortable chiming in on all this state stuff. come right in. But it's, the CAM Act itself, when you read, so they're both under chapter 22A of the Connecticut State Statutes. They're written differently. So the protections for inland wetlands and watercourses are kicked back to the municipalities. And the regulations define all the things that an inland wetland agency can consider. And then for the Coastal Area Management Act, the tidal wetlands, the estuaries themselves, the embayments, the dunes, the beaches, the mud flats, those are regulated directly by the state of Connecticut, deep. And so we have what's now called a coastal jurisdiction line, which in Norwalk is at elevation 5.4. So anything at or below elevation 5.4 is under the jurisdiction of the state of Connecticut and deep. And they're the ones that are regulating the direct impacts to those natural resources. Then CAM Act gives the municipalities some ability to regulate certain activities closest to the coast in a way that is in line with the goals and policies of the CAM Act. And a lot of those goals and policies are kind of larger scale things as opposed to like the individual lot. It's more land use and planning. So what zones, so for instance, like we just sent the draft regulations to the people that review coastal area management plans, because they want to see, well, what are the zones or the districts that are adjacent to the coast? Are you changing the density, or are you encouraging non-water dependent uses? So things like water dependent use is something that the CAM Act regulates. If you have a marina, for example, that's a water dependent use. It's hard to have a marina, over in West Norwalk, right? But it's protective of not just the natural resources, but those marine uses. And so it's really kind of looking at where are their single family, where is their residential, where is their commercial, where is their water dependent uses. And then it has kind of some additional language about for the non-exempt uses, the uses that are right on the water, how much can be done. But you're right, though, Norwalk in the past has treated CAM kind of from a zoning perspective as opposed to a solely environmental perspective. I'd agree with you there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, where I see it in action, I mean, like, because the act says, that they can be doing things, all the things you mentioned, like landscaping and gardening regulations, hazard geological review, conservation, which is very open-ended in terms of like for the benefit of the tidal wetlands, setback requirements, and there's nothing in the new zoning that really specifically deals with properties that are in the coastal management and actually in the tidal wetlands, and there's nothing in there that talks about flooding, but it doesn't talk about the change of tides, and tides have changed. And with climate, with the sea level rise, obviously the coastline changes. And so people have bought houses and are wondering like, well, geez, I didn't see it at high tide. I thought, the setbacks from 10 foot, but at high tide, it's 1 foot from my foundation when there's a full moon regularly now, and so that's not really beneficial, as we're sea levels coming up, and so those are kind of things that just really have that dimension's just not reflected in the zoning.
Right. And part of that, so the language in the proposed CAM section is much more in line and comes from draft municipal regulations from DEEP. So it's much more, it does have more than we have now. But you're right, it is, it doesn't directly address, it doesn't specifically talk about flood, but it does better. It so tired. It does more clearly state that coastal site plan review and the CAM process have to show that whatever is being proposed is in line with all of the goals and policies of the Coastal Area Management Act. And within the Coastal Management Act, there is talk about flood hazard, not so much, you're right, about sea level change exactly, but it is in there. So if you go to the state statutes, the CAM Act is really long. It has a lot of information in it, and it's all, I don't know, it's all there. So in the municipal regulations, we don't say everything that's in the CAM Act, but we do make it clear that we're referring back to that. Does that make sense? No. But it is frustrating because it is a different regulatory scheme than inland wetlands. But they are getting better with their review and requiring, trying to require planted buffers adjacent to coastal waters, suggesting when they do get new applications that, I mean, the majority of our coastline has seawalls or revetments already, so we're already hardscaped. Trying to get people to consider removing those and doing soft shoreline and other things.
If we wanted to enact a green building standard in Norwalk, would it be through zoning or would it be through the building department?
Probably a little bit of both. So the building department goes straight off of the Connecticut, building code.
Yep.
And the building department, doesn't really have there's no building commission. So I would say going through zoning, if it's required by zoning, then it would be, I think zoning is your easiest bet.
Okay. Well, that's going to be one that I'm
And-
personally interested in.
Right. And so for green building code, you mean, you're really talking about, yeah, so it's really the building code. So what zoning would do, so we've had these discussions, like how do we incentivize or require, better building? And so what a lot of zoning departments end up doing is incentivizing or requiring things like a LEED gold or a LEED
Right.
silver or platinum.
Right.
Because zoning can't really get into too much of the nitty-gritty building code.
Okay. Well, I mean, like NGBS, for example, is the National Green Building Standard, which is actually
Right.
An actual code that one could adopt and enforce, whereas LEED is an elective rating system. Which is different. I mean, some municipalities do adopt that. That's trickier than just taking NGBS, because that, like I said, that is a code. And so, I mean, it could be an easy one-line thing. I mean, the implications go beyond just the building itself. It's, site work and lighting and, landscaping, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
So anyway, okay. I was just curious. Because we keep hearing about these, all these new apartment buildings going up, And none of them are interested in doing anything better than the bare minimum unless, they're
Mhm.
forced to.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's because Norwalk, is just a good place to develop, or are Norwalk standards lower than, other comparable places? I don't know. Have other towns adopted more restrictive requirements and therefore developers are more interested in Norwalk? I don't know. Probably not, you think?
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good thing.
Well, couldn't they enforce it on themselves? So if they're developing a school or building a new school? doing
Well,
a
schools already have, I think it's mostly private, residential or commercial, or industrial, not so much institutional, because they're already held like I think any building in
Might as well be.
Connecticut that's owned by Connecticut or gets funding or whatever has to be LEED certified, I believe. I think all schools pretty much have to do it anyway.
Right.
But I'm talking about just like, residential buildings, commercial buildings, houses,
Right. Your 14-unit apartment building, right?
or your 150 unit apartment building. I mean, okay. Well,
Yeah, I mean, that goes down to like the EV, if they want to get all the school buses, I mean, they're gonna need to charge and recharge because they're doing multiple routes. And putting in the minimum of like 2 charging stations isn't gonna cut it for a fleet of buses,
right. Yeah.
There's infrastructure hurdles.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
I'll parcel out the regs and maybe I'll email them out, and then maybe you guys can just use email to get your dibs about, whatever interests. Does that work?
yeah,
Like
I'll
as far
probably
as
put together an
delivery.
online spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. Where everyone can contribute in real time and see each other's comments and whatever, if that's okay. Or if anybody else is interested in doing that, you're welcome to lead the way.
If you love spreadsheets, I'll leave it up to you.
I second the motion.
Spreadsheets are my life. Okay. All right. Well, that's since it's getting a little late, that was good stuff there. And thanks, Catherine, for volunteering to be a part of that. Because right, didn't you get involved in one of the?
Yeah, I went to the zoning presentation
Okay.
or the listened in on Zoom, and
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for doing that. And of course, always thanks, Alexis, for giving us the scoop and everything else you do in zoning. Okay. Comments of staff?
No, that's it.
Okay.
I'm done.
Comments of commissioners? All right. Then I will move to adjourn. Can I have a second? Come on, Amy. Come on, Amy. There you go. Got it.
A second.
Nice work.
Got one for today.
Well done.
Okay. I assume no conversation or discussion, and all in favor. We'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.
sounds
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Have
night.
a good night.
Night.